In my town, everybody must be inside before sundown. I never knew why, but now I'm pretty sure it's a good idea. When I was 14, my uncle announced to me that we would be moving to Wyoming. I'm not going to name the town for obvious privacy reasons. I was ready to move, not because I was being bullied or anything, but I just wasn't a fan of the crowded population. And also, I wasn't a fan of the town. My mom was a single mom who gave birth to me from an anonymous donor. That part wasn't what made me hate the town. My mom was mugged and killed when I was 7, and her brother, my uncle, took me in. I didn't witness it myself as I was staying with my uncle when it happened. He broke the news the next day. But I don't need your pity. I've long moved on. And my uncle has become like my parent. He's not the stereotypical uncle character either. My Uncle Matt was almost 7 feet tall, muscular, and had dyed purple hair and was overall just really intimidating. However, his personality was and still is overall pleasant. He's very nice to me and is like a patient father to both his friends and family. He's also a retired military soldier from the Marine Corps, so he's quite tough. And although he's in his late 40s, he's still in good shape and looks as if he's in his late 20s or 30s. And despite his age, he keeps up with the modern day almost perfectly. So he's not like an old man or anything when trying to work a computer, and he actually understands the internet culture. Sorry, I'm going a little off topic. So, we arrived at our new home, and there was a welcome committee to greet us. Although strangely, they didn't want me in the same room as them and my uncle. When they left, my uncle had a dead serious look on his face. He looked down at my 5'9" figure and warned me, "Ethan, this might sound really weird, but stay inside after sundown." I was confused but replied, "Okay, Uncle Matt, I won't." He gave me a smile and said, "Great. Now, let's finish setting up this place." 2 years passed, and things started going really well. I made a lot of friends, and my uncle even got a new girlfriend named Amy around 6 months in. Today they're married, happily, and I'm glad I now have something similar to a mother figure in my life. I was 16 then, and that's when I made one of the biggest mistakes of my life. Curiosity got the best of me after 2 years of not being allowed outside after sunset. That, combined with me being a young and dumb teenager, led me to stay out. I lied to my uncle, saying I was staying at a friend's house and was going to stay the night. I even faked text messages with my friend to convince my uncle. Yeah. I left and waited until the sun went down. I then went onto the streets. All businesses were closed, and honestly, I was really tempted to rob the stores as there were no cameras. Told you, dumb teenager. But I came to my senses and chose not to. The only place open from what I could see was the hospital. I then got out my ocarina and started to play an original song I made just for practice. So far, it was pretty boring. No cars were out, no people, nothing. I sat down on a park bench and began browsing through Instagram and messaging my online friends. I looked at the time, and it was 9 p.m. In my exploration, I didn't realize that 5 hours had passed. It was dark out now, and I honestly felt like sneaking back home through the window. But I knew I'd get my ass chewed out by my uncle and his girlfriend, so I decided to try and sleep in the park for the night. I turned off my phone, tucked it underneath the bench, and then tried to go to sleep. That's when I heard the groaning noise. I startled awake, only to see nothing there. I stood up and grabbed my phone. I messaged one of my school friends, Anthony. He's lived here since he was born, and said, "Hey, I think I just heard something groaning outside. Isn't everyone supposed to be inside? A few seconds later, he replies back, Ethan, you're not supposed to be outside right now. He then followed that up with, promise me that if you see one of them, never look it in the eyes. I was confused but shrugged it off as him trying to scare me for breaking the rules of the town. He was always like that, a jokester. But in the back of my head, I couldn't shake the feeling that he was really trying to warn me of something. I began to walk around some more. That's when I saw a faint pink glow from an alleyway. I approached it thoughtlessly and saw what I can only describe as something that didn't belong in this world. It wasn't the first time I'd seen something spooky, as I have seen stuff like white silhouettes before which turned out to just be moonlight reflecting a certain way. This was the closest I had ever gotten to something like that. In fact, if I hadn't skidded to a sudden halt, I would have knocked myself straight into it. I jumped behind a trash can nearby and watched the creature. It was at least 8 feet tall, and it had 2 large glowing eyes which were light pink in color. It was so skinny, and it didn't even seem to have any organs, just bones. The creature was a humanoid. Its hands were long, and its fingers. Its skin was a bluish-gray color. Its feet were also thin and long, and they lacked toes. At first, I thought it didn't even have a mouth, until I realized its mouth was on its throat, right where a man's Adam's apple would have been. It didn't seem to notice me, and for some reason I got an almost irresistible urge to look it in the eyes. I couldn't help it. I had to get just one look into its eyes. I also couldn't help but admire the surreal beauty of the thing standing before me. That's when it cracked its head to look straight at me. It stood up, opened its mouth, and let out the most shrill and high-pitched screech I've ever heard. I turned and bolted out of there, but I heard the creature follow. My mind was racing with thoughts of what it would do to me if it caught me. I was terrified and didn't stop running. My lungs burned and my legs ached, as though the ground was crushing them into pieces, but I didn't stop. All I could focus on was getting away from the abomination chasing me. I keep glancing behind me only to see it getting closer. I also saw other ones slowly appearing in the distance, seemingly searching for other humans outside. I then saw the one building open, the hospital. In desperation, I opened the door, practically leapt inside, and slammed it shut. The lady at the front desk saw my distressed face as I tried to catch my breath. Oh God, please tell me there's not one of them out there. We can't let them inside. Then I heard that same groaning noise. I froze, panicked. The lady did too. I turned and saw the creature outside, almost pressed against the door's glass. The only thing between me and the thing was just a 2-inch thick barrier, the door. I knew that the door was nothing to this beast, as it was almost 2 full feet taller than it. I stood up and then began to run towards the desk. Then the creature squatted down and with full force elbowed the door. The door came crashing down and the creature came inside. This was it. I was going to die. I'd accepted it. My entire life flashed before my eyes as it stood right over me. Then, my phone starts to ring. It was the same song I played on my ocarina earlier. I looked at my phone. My uncle was calling. The creature then recoiled and screamed, seemingly in either fear or shock, possibly both. I then knew what to do. I turned on my flashlight app and set it to constantly flash. I then blew into my ocarina as hard as I possibly could. The humanoid then got on all fours and dashed outside as I heard its screams become fainter as it ran into the dark. I held the ocarina to my mouth the rest of the night. Luckily, I didn't have another run-in with the humanoids. As soon as the sun began to come up, I ran as hard as I could back home, my mind racing, not believing what I just witnessed. As soon as I got back home, I saw my uncle's girlfriend, and she didn't seem too happy with me. I called your friend's mom, and she said, "You weren't there at all. Where the hell were you?" She said, "Relax, babe. He's probably had a rough night." I just looked down and told them, "You have no idea." "What happened to you?" My uncle said. I went outside, and I saw one of them. Its face, its mouth, God, its eyes. I had to be calmed down for what felt like hours before I could manage to tell them what happened. When I finally told them everything, I half expected them to call me a liar. Instead, my uncle looked completely shocked, while his girlfriend looked white as a sheet of paper. "Ethan, I told you never to go outside after sundown. You didn't listen. You almost got yourself killed," my uncle said. He had a tone that was stern and anxious at the same time. "Ethan, we didn't want you to know why, but now I guess you do. Nobody knows what they are or where they came from, but what we do know is that they are never to be looked into the eyes," my uncle's girlfriend told me. "Well, I drove it off, didn't I?" "Yes, but never do it again. You understand me, Ethan?" "Yes, I won't, I promise. I promise," I shouted. I had to go to therapy as I suffer from PTSD after almost losing my life. I'm 19 now, and I'm currently saving up to get as far away from this town as possible. I still have no idea what those things were, but now I know why it's a good idea to stay inside after sundown. If only I knew why they wanted me inside. If only I knew. Never again. There's been a tornado warning for the past 3 days, but I don't think what's outside is a tornado. I live in the Midwest. I won't say where, but I live in an area that's prone to weather warnings, specifically tornadoes. We mostly get them between April and June, but it's not too unusual to get them later in the year. What is unusual, however, is having them last for 3 days. It began 3 days ago. I had just gotten home from another boring day's work and had plopped myself down on the couch with a beer, microwave dinner, and my dog, Sam, a small rescue dog. Don't ask me her breed, as I don't know. I plan on getting a little drunk and falling asleep to some late-night TV, my usual weekday routine. However, I was rudely interrupted by my TV and phone blasting a tornado warning. Looking outside, I could see it was a little stormy, but it definitely didn't look like tornado weather. Sighing, I pulled myself off the couch and took my dog and dinner down into the cellar below the house. I only realized that after I closed the door to my cellar that I had forgot my beer. My cellar is just as glamorous as my house. I'm sure you can imagine what that means. Walking down the steps, my hand made its way across the wall before finding the light switch. I knew that power wouldn't last for long, so I began to warm up the generator. After that, I double-checked I had some food and water before sitting down on my old chair. I stayed down there and switched on my radio. I figured I'd at least get half an hour of radio signal before it was distorted and eventually washed away by the storm. While I began finishing off my dinner, the radio crackled to life. Emergency weather alert broadcast for Sumner County, Kansas. Residents are advised to stay indoors or in a storm cellar and to shut all windows. All residents are advised to lock all doors, barricade cellar entrances, and not to answer any call for help or request for entry until an official signal. Stay safe. Good luck. Wait, what? I said, bolting upright and almost choking on my food. I quickly leaned forward and turned up the radio volume, hoping to catch the warning for a second time. Residents are advised to lock all doors, barricade cellar entrances, and not to answer any call for help or request for entry until an official signal. Stay safe. Good luck. The radio had finally cut out, just as rain began to pelt the roof of the rest of the upstairs. No matter, I had heard it again, for certain. Lock all doors, barricade cellar entrances, and not to answer any call for help or request for entry until an official signal. It played over and over again in my head. Don't get me wrong, this isn't my first rodeo when it comes to big storms or tornadoes. I spent countless hours holed up in here while rain, lightning, tornadoes, and hail wreak havoc above me, but never in my life have I been told to lock my doors or not to answer any call for help or request for entry. That's weird. Initially, I played it off as there possibly being looters who would enter the homes of hiding people and rob them. This happened before, but never during a storm, and never to such an extent to where the county would warn us about them. Besides, looters don't try and alert homeowners to their presence by asking for entry. Anyway, I tried my best not to think about it and eventually drifted off to sleep much earlier than I would have, probably due to boredom. With nothing to do other than listen to the pelting rain above you, it's pretty hard to stay awake. I was awoken around 3 a.m. to Sam barking and growling at the cellar door. It was weird. She never barked in storms, only at people at the door or some other dogs. I walked up the stairs and rested my ears against the cellar door. All I could hear was the heavy rain and occasionally some thunder. It was weird. The tornado should have passed by now, but we still didn't get an official signal. It's not like I would have slept through it. I'm a light sleeper, and I made sure the radio volume was up real high. Just as I was about to go back to my chair, I hear it. The creak of my front door opening. Crap, I thought to myself. I forgot to lock it. Sam started barking louder, despite my attempts to shush her. The house was quiet for a moment. I used this time to stick a wooden board between the door handles, making the door almost impossible to open from the outside. But then, I hear it. Footsteps. They were light, but definitely there. I followed them with my ears as they made their way around my house. It was hard to pinpoint exactly where they were, but I definitely heard them. My eyes rushed around the room as my panic rose. It felt like there was a pit in my stomach. I was nauseated with fear. I had left my rifle upstairs, and down here, the best excuse for a weapon was a long steak knife I had brought down before. I switched off the cellar light, which I had stupidly left on, and stuck my eye in between the two cellar doors that opened out into my house. Sam had quieted down, but was still growling. My eyes glanced around the limited field of view that it had. I could see my couch, stairs, and closed door to my bedroom, so not too much. It was then I noticed that the footsteps had stopped. Is this what the radio had warned about? I thought over all the scenarios in my head. A looter, someone seeking shelter, wild animal maybe? None of it made sense. Then, there was the knock. I wasn't sure if I had heard it properly at first, but it quickly progressed from a quiet tapping into a banging crescendo. It sounded like thousands of fists had descended onto my cellar door, thrashing and pounding against it. Whatever was banging, I knew I couldn't let it in. This must have been what the radio had warned about. This must have been it. Instinctively, I jumped back and nearly fell backwards down the stairs leading into my cellar. Surprisingly, I composed myself and yelled at whatever was out there. "Hey, Get out of my house! I'm armed! I shouted. I don't think I was too convincing, probably thanks to the slight tremble in my voice. The banging on my door stopped. Did I scare it away? I thought to myself. It was quiet for a few minutes, but the uneasy silence was shattered when it spoke.
Hey man, you need to let me in. It's really dangerous out here. I don't know how long I can last.
Possible. It was the voice of my brother. I hadn't seen him in years, not since he moved to the West Coast. There is no possible way he was in the state. Hell, he didn't even know where I lived. Every ounce of my being knew that whatever spoke was definitely not my brother, but something else. And yet, I still replied. Mark?
Yeah, it's been a while. Let me in, man.
I need to see you.
At the end of its sentence, its voice trailed off. It was deeper, raspy, not the voice of my brother at all. I knew I couldn't respond. It spoke again.
Look, Alec, for the love of God, it's dangerous out here.
The storm is growing stronger.
I didn't give it the satisfaction of a reply, which only seemed to make it more angry.
Let me in. Let me in. Let me in.
It screamed out of frustration. Its scream was sickening, a high-pitched wail that filled the air and made me want to throw up. After that, it started banging on the door again. I waited until it stopped. It was quiet for a couple of hours after that. The storm continued, seemingly without a tornado. However, I was startled to hear my radio crackle to life. Emergency weather alert canceled. Residents are advised to leave their cellars to secure properties. That is all. I let out a sigh of relief. However, my relief was short-lived. The broadcast seemed off. Usually at the end of a storm, there would be a damage report and locations where you could go to receive aid, and even maybe a bed for the night. Plus, I could hear the rain and thunder above me. There was no way a signal could get through. It must have somehow hijacked my radio signal. Every few minutes the same line would be repeated with perfect sound quality. It was enough to make me want to unplug the thing altogether. If I wasn't afraid of missing the actual end signal, I might have. 3 days have passed without the storm and my radio subsiding. That thing, whatever it is still out there, occasionally banging on my door to remind me. I'm at my wit's end. If it wasn't for Sam, I think I would have gone insane by now. That's all for the moment. I'll update you if I can. Until then, wish me luck. Hi, my name is Daniel. I'm 25, and I can't fall asleep anymore. It's not that I'm physically unable to fall asleep, but it's that I don't want to. Ever since I can remember, I'd have these hellish nightmares, and these just aren't even regular nightmares. They not only feel real, but cause me to sleepwalk and act out some of the actions in my dreams. Here, I'll explain. For example, I can remember once in middle school, I made the mistake of falling asleep during my teacher's class. I still remember my teacher, Mr. Lockhart. He taught history and was always so entertaining to hear lecture, but on this particular day, I ended up falling asleep during his lecture. I probably fell asleep due to my exhaustion of not being able to fall asleep the previous night. The nightmare that I had that day was so terrifying that I ended up peeing my pants And not only that, but running around the classroom, hopping on the desks of other students, while yelling at the creatures from my nightmare that were constantly chasing me with their knives, ready to eat my flesh, to stop. All the while, in the real world, the students in the class laughed at me and poked fun of me. It goes without saying that the rest of my years in school sucked. I was forever known as the boy who peed his pants, the boy who sees things, the boy who sleepwalks. I think you get the picture. Ever since that day, I made sure not to fall asleep during a class lecture. Over the years, I've learned to deal with my condition. I've managed to get through high school, play sports, graduate college, and even married the girl of my dreams, Nadia. We met in college. She was a cheerleader, and yes, I was on the basketball team. Cliché, I know, but it's the truth. Now that you've got a little backstory, let's get to why you're listening to this. 3 days ago, I fell asleep. I had just come back home from a hard day's work, kissed my wife goodnight, and slept in my cell. Yes, a cell. I built it myself with reinforced steel bars surrounding it, just to be safe, because there have been a couple of times where I've acted violently or hurt myself while I was in a nightmare. A bit overkill, I know, but better safe than sorry. Over the years, I've developed a technique that helps me sleep. I call it my safe zone. Essentially, before falling asleep, I put on my earpods and turn on a classical music playlist. This allows me to be transported into an all-white square room with nothing but a bed in the center. A bed in which I fall asleep onto to escape the nightmare outside for which surround the all-white room. Call it a second layer of protection, if that makes sense. When I fell asleep that night, everything went as it usually does. I was transported into the white room. I could faintly hear the classical music I fell asleep to, playing in the background. Before getting onto my bed, I placed my ears against one of the white walls and listened. I pushed the classical music to the very back of my mind and focused. About 10 seconds of silence pass, and suddenly, I hear something.
I can hear you. I can hear you breathing.
I immediately pull away from the wall and curse. The laughter echoes throughout the room. I run to the bed and put on some classical tunes and close my eyes. Usually, when I do so, I'm safe to dream without any nightmares. It's as though I've left my nightmares behind. Like I said, it's like a second layer of protection. However, today, when I opened my eyes, all I saw was darkness. I felt around and noticed that I was still on the bed from the white room. However, this time, I couldn't see anything. I sat up and turned my head in an attempt to find a source of light. In that moment, about 20 feet in front of me, a glowing white door starts to materialize. The door's light slightly illuminates the room, and I noticed that I was in a black room. The room was a replica of the other room, except it was all black. I get off the bed and head towards the door.
Hello? Is anyone there?
I say, but don't get a response. In fact, I don't hear anything. Completely nothing. No white noise, not even the faint sound of the classical music. Then suddenly, the doorknob starts to rattle as it turns.
No. Wake up, come on. You can't get me in here. This is my safe zone.
I say to myself, trying to wake myself up, closing my eyes repeatedly, but when I open my eyes, I'm back in the same black room, and that's when the door opens. An indescribable creature emerges through the door. It was so large in size that it had to bend halfway down and maneuver its body through the door. It breathes heavily and stands up straight. It was 12 feet tall at least, had black, crocodile-like scales, red eyes with snake-like pupils, and colossal claws and canines. It speaks to me.
Welcome to my domain. Oh, how long I've awaited for this moment.
Who? What are you?
I am Sihr. I'm sure you've heard of me. What is it they call me on your world? Ah, yes. I am Wrath, destroyer of worlds, bringer of darkness and decay. Tell me, Daniel, have you heard of me before?
Yes. Yes, I have. But you're nothing but a mythology, an idea. You don't actually exist in the flesh. This is just a nightmare.
I assure you, Daniel, I am very much real. Now, tell me, Daniel, do you know who you are?
What are you talking about?
I say, if I can make it to my bed and close my eyes, I can wake back up if I got back to the white room, I thought to myself.
Every world I've destroyed, every world I've decimated, has a door. After successfully ending all life on a planet, I await for my next doorway to usher me into a new universe, awaiting the arrival of Wrath, the arrival of death.
That's right, I think to myself as I get closer to my bed. Keep talking.
You, Daniel, are my doorway. You've eluded my capture by slipping into different universes I've yet to conquer. But today, I have captured you.
Yeah, I don't think so.
I quickly hop onto my bed and close my eyes shut as hard as I can. The demon screams.
No!
I can feel its claws slightly pierce into my skin on my face. I open my eyes and I find myself in the white room again. I could hear the classical music. That was a good sign. I wasted no time. I quickly closed my eyes with all my heart and strength, and I thought of nothing but waking up in the real world. And I did. I woke up to my wife, shaking me and yelling for me to wake up.
Wake up! Wake up! You had a really bad nightmare. You were shaking and, oh God, you're bleeding.
She was right. I was bleeding at the exact same place where the demon had scratched me. God, it felt so real. I hugged my wife and dug my face into her shoulder as I shook from fear. That's when I heard it. The faint sound of classical music, followed by laughter. My heart sank, and everything around me crumbled away. Darkness was all that was left. I never woke up. How long have I been asleep for? I don't know who can hear this, but I'm desperately reaching out to whatever powers may be beyond this world, this universe. I think I'm stuck in a dream, in a nightmare. Please, help me.
My parents never took me anywhere. I had never left our small town in Texas before the age of 25. Once I did, I realized just how much I love the road. Most truckers, you see, will tell you they have a list of freaky stuff a mile long that they've seen while on the road. And in my 30 years, I thought I had already seen the worst. I was so unbelievably wrong. I was on my way to San Antonio towards Dallas after making a 7 p.m. drop-off. I still had a few hours to go when I stopped at a small diner off 35. I had missed lunch that day and had to piss like a racehorse. I pulled my rig into the gravel lot and parked around the side of the building. I locked up and jogged inside. When I first got inside, there were a few things I noticed right away. One, the restaurant was completely empty. I don't mean there was only a few tables of diners. I mean, there was nobody. There was no waiters, no cooks, no anyone. I took a second look at the door to see the open sign, blinking red. I then found my way to the bathroom to relieve myself. I figured if anything, I would just find the restroom and leave to find a McDonald's or something at the next exit. However, when I exited the bathroom, I was no longer the only person in the restaurant. Sitting at the bar was an older gentleman. His gray hair was neatly gelled away from his face. He had a dark gray suit that was fitted nicely onto his slender frame. He appeared to be in his 70s and was taking a drag of a cigar as I stepped out. He didn't immediately acknowledge my presence, but after taking another drag, he looked over at me. He nodded lightly and patted the stool beside him, gesturing for me to sit down. I was hesitant at first, but I figured the guy was probably harmless being how old he was. I walked over and sat down beside him, looking around for any employees, but saw none. "Can I get you a drink?" he asked. His voice was a bit lower than I expected. No, just water would be fine." He eyed me for a few seconds. His dark brown wrinkled eyes scanned my face up and down a few times before he made a move to stand. I noticed he used a cane as he made his way around the counter to the sink. As he began to fill my cup up, he glanced back at me. "We don't get a lot of customers here," he said, sitting a full cup of water in front of me, leaning his arms onto the bar, watching me closely. "Well, do you work here?" I asked, taking a small sip. The man chuckled softly. "Sort of. I own the place." I nodded and looked around once more. How long you been here, sir?" "As long as I can remember," he answered, standing up straight. "You hungry?" he asked, turning away from me. Yeah, I could go for a burger or something." The man nodded and disappeared to the back for a few minutes. He returned with the juiciest burger I had ever seen. He gently sat it in front of me and then slowly made his way back around the bar to sit beside me. I quickly dug into the meal, realizing how hungry I was. The man watched me for a few moments before speaking up again. "What's your name?" I swallowed the bite in my mouth and glanced over. "Steve," I said quickly before shoving more burger into my mouth. The man nodded slightly. "I'm Nick." He pulled a cigarette out of his suit pocket and lit it. He held it towards me, offering a hit. I politely declined and finished up my food. "Thanks for the dinner. It was delicious." "What do I owe you?" I asked, standing up. Nick looked over at me and smirked. "There are people who want more than just a meal." I stood awkwardly, unsure how to respond to that. Okay. Nick stood up and walked over to the entrance. Food is not what you truly desire tonight. I stared at him for a few seconds, unsure if he was joking or just totally off his rockers. I laid a 10 on the table and walked towards the door, brushing against him as I shoved it open. I began to make my way across the parking lot towards my truck, glancing back at the diner. Nick was still standing at the entrance, grinning widely. I climbed into my truck and drove off, glad to be rid of the strange place and its owner. Nick remained in my mind for the rest of that night. A lot of the drive was just empty road, no real identifying marks, so I thought it was weird that I had driven for about an hour and had only came across one other building. I really had to pee again, and another small diner was the only building I'd seen. I pull into the lot and go out, rushing inside. I almost pissed my pants then and there when I looked around. The diner was empty. I looked over towards the bar area, seeing a familiar gray head of hair. Nick spun around to face me and chuckled softly. Nice to have you back, Steve. Now, I was partly scared and partly furious. What the hell do you want from me? I yelled at the man. How the hell did you do this? Nick stood up slowly and made his way over to me. It's what you want, not me. He gestured to a nearby booth, and I reluctantly sat down across from him. So, Steve, he started, tell me a little bit about yourself. I did not have time for this crap. Bite me, I said harshly, almost spitting at him in the process. I wasn't sure why I was so angry, but perhaps my fear had just manifested in that way. How could I be at the same diner that I had driven away from over 50 miles ago? Nick shook his head, laughing softly. Steve. He looked up, meeting my eyes with his dark ones. I knew they were brown, but they were so dark that they almost looked black in the low setting of the diner. Don't be hostile. I'm trying to help you. I studied his face for a moment, trying to find some kind of sign that this was some elaborate joke. Perhaps some camera crew was going to jump out of the back, telling me I was on some new prank show. No camera crew ever came. I don't understand, I said softly, finally calming down enough to try to rationalize things. There is something you want, and I can give it to you. I looked up at him once more. His face showed no expression. It was virtually unreadable. I had no idea what he was talking about, so I repeated my previous statement. Tell me about yourself, Steve. Maybe it will begin to make sense to you then. I looked down at the table. I hadn't talked about it before, but I was ready to. If it meant getting me out of this, I'd do anything. I've been a trucker for 30 years now. Nick nodded, leaning back in the booth. Why? What kind of question was that? I like driving. He studied me for just half a second before nodding. You like driving or running? What in the hell is that supposed to mean? Nick shrugged, folding his arms over his chest. Exactly what I said. I glanced out the diner window, looking out towards the interstate for a few seconds before Nick cleared his throat, bringing my attention back to him. Steve, what happened before you became a trucker? I looked down at the dinner table, unable to make eye contact with him. I had a family, I said, almost whispering. You did? A wife and a beautiful daughter, he said, a smug look on his face. I snapped my head up. How the hell did he know that? Nick must have caught on to my surprise pretty quickly because he responded to the question I hadn't actually asked. I know everything, Steve. Then why did you ask? I said, beginning to get angry again. Because you have to be the one to say it. Yeah, I had a wife and a daughter, but they're gone now. And they've been gone for a really long time. Nick nodded, leaning forward, resting his elbows on the table. And what happened to them, Steve? They're dead from a fire. Nick watched me quietly for a few moments. I'm very sorry to hear that, Steve. He wasn't lying. He was being sincere in his sympathy. I nodded quietly, not meeting his eyes. I don't mean to be a buzzkill, Steve, but nice people don't end up in my diner, he said, abruptly ending the awkward silence that had been occurring. I looked up at him. What? Nick folded his arms across his chest once more. What really happened that night, Steve? I shook my head. I already told you. It was a fire. Nick nodded softly. And what caused the fire? Faulty wiring, I said, leaning back on the booth. Nick nodded once more. I could finally make something out of his face. He was thinking. The gears in his mind were turning as he thought of his response. You don't believe that, he finally said. Of course I do. That's what they said. But we both know that wasn't what caused the fire. He sat up straight, leaning in close to me. We both know that coincidence is what saved your ass. Did the faulty wires pass out with a lit cigarette as well? I stood up, shoving the table towards him hard. What are you insinuating? I yelled, getting in his face. I grabbed him by the suit collar, his cane falling to the ground. I drew back my fist, ready to hit him right then and there. It was a drunken mistake, Steve, he said to me, not even flinching at my sudden outburst. I looked over him. Who the hell are you? Nick laughed quite loudly this time. If I told you, you never believe me. I let go of his shirt collar, picking up his cane for him before straightening him up again. What is it you want? Nick leaned against his cane, watching me. I already told you. It's about what you want, Steve. I watched for a minute before chuckling softly to myself. You can't give me what I really want, I said to him, looking him in his eyes. He didn't break eye contact as a wild smile spread across his face. Try me. I stared at him for a long time, searching for any deceptiveness. I found none. I sat back down at the booth and sighed deeply, staring at the ground. I felt tears prick my eyes as my throat swelled a bit. I just want them back, I croaked. Nick watched me for a long time before speaking again. I can do that. I looked up at him, tears now actively flowing down my cheeks. That's not funny, Nick shrugged. Who said I was joking? I stood up, getting in his face again. Do not mess with me, old man. Not about this topic. He held his hands up defensively. I'm not. I let go, and he crossed his arms. I can give them back to you. For a price. I rolled my eyes before locking eyes with him again. Well, spit it. What's the price? I asked, genuinely interested in what this crazy old bat would want. Nick chuckled quietly. Well, Steve, all I want from you is your soul. My soul? I asked, almost in disbelief. Yeah, it was official. This guy was insane. After you die, of course, Nick said, making sure I fully understood the terms. I'd come to collect in another 30 years. I laughed loudly. This old bag wouldn't even be alive in 30 years. Hell, he looked like he could drop dead in another 30 minutes, let alone 30 years. So, I agree to give you my soul after I die, and you will bring back my wife and daughter from the dead? I couldn't believe I was even saying this. Was I in some kind of movie? Perhaps I was dreaming.
Exactly.
Nick replied, short and sweet and to the point. Who are you? I asked, wondering what kind of drugs this dude was on.
Well, Steve, I'm the devil.
He responded, far more casually than I would have expected. I looked at him. So, you're the devil, and you want my soul? Nick shrugged.
Yes.
Hell, I won't need it after I die, now will I? If I agree to this, will you let me go? I just want to go home. I needed to entertain him, humor him so I can get on with my life. Hopefully I leave and never have to think of this weird night ever again. Nick nodded, extended his hand for mine.
Yeah, you won't see me in another 30 years.
I shook his hand firmly. It was far harder than I expected. I quickly withdrew my hand and looked at it. It had turned beet red. When I looked back up from my injury, Nick was gone. Not just that, but the whole diner was gone. I looked around. I was pulled off into a small field. My truck parked about 100 yards away on the side of the road. I looked around once more, but saw nothing in any direction. I quickly jogged back over to my rig and pulled back onto the interstate. I drove straight home, not wanting to stop again for fear I'd never make it back. I arrived around midnight, which is nearly impossible considering the drive was 4 hours and I'd spent at least 2 hours in some stupid diner. It should have been closer to 3 or 4 in the morning, but no, it was like I never stopped on the way home. As I unlocked my front door, I stepped inside, looking around in the dark. I flipped the light switch and kicked off my boots.
Steve!
I heard a voice call from upstairs. I froze. That wasn't just anyone's voice. No, that was my Christina's voice, the one I'd lost all those years ago. I heard the patter of little feet scampering across the floor upstairs.
Daddy?
This was impossible. My little girl had died 30 years ago. I thought every day how I had taken her life from her and her mother. Christina? Marie? I called back, in disbelief at what I was hearing. Was it possible that Nick was telling the truth? He really was the devil? That meant that I had really sold my soul. It didn't matter now, though. I had 30 years to spend with my family. 30 years I thought I'd miss out on. I was deep in thought as my wife and daughter finally made their way down the steps. I realized then and there that Nick was without a doubt the devil himself. I had made a deal with the devil, and the reason I knew was because he was notorious for being a trickster. I looked over my wife and child, trying not to vomit. Their skin was black and charred, falling off in chunks all over their body. Their clothes were melted and fused into their skin. I knew then and there that these next 30 years with them would be the worst 30 years spent grieving over them. They were now a constant reminder of what I had done, and the worst of it was that I had sold my soul for this. I think I know exactly how he's going to kill me. I may as well take the smoke detectors down now.
Dear Diary, today I killed 4 people, ran low on supplies, had to make a run. It's quiet, the silence speaks to me, telling me its truth. She's crying. The pain of being raped, pillaged, and left for dead burns deep. I keep silent. There is no solace I can provide. I kept silent before, watched helplessly like the masses. Watched as we depleted our Earth of her natural resources, her natural beauty, then left her for dead. So how can I say anything when my words will only bring her more pain? Silence is the best course of action. I've been on the road for a day now. I managed to steer clear of any other survivors. A pleasant victory. In my 5 years since this world has gone to hell, I've learned it's best to keep your distance. Trust no one. Be selfish and be ruthless. Those are my rules to survive a world without any rules. My eyes are peeled. There's a town nearby, meaning survivors are nearby, meaning trouble isn't too far behind. As if on cue, trouble makes itself known to me. The road ahead of me is blocked off by cars and a large black tarp. I slow down as 4 figures emerge from underneath the tarp. As I come to a stop, they draw close to me, impeding my ability to progress. I let down my bike stand and dismount. I'm able to get a better look at them. 3 men, 1 woman, dressed in all black tactical uniforms, riddled with bullet holes, torn and tattered in different areas. They no doubt stolen from corpses of fallen survivors. The question is, were they responsible for their demise? One of the men steps forward to address me. The moment he opens his mouth, I make note of his teeth. They look battered and worn out, as if someone had taken a bat to them. The others were no different. Yellow teeth, dirty appearance, shifty eyes.
Haven't seen another survivor in days, so you'd understand my curiosity when I ask, what you doing around these parts, partner?
I choose to keep silent. The female steps forward.
I believe the kind gentleman here asked you a question. What's the matter? Cat got your tongue?
I remain silent, even in the midst of these 4 no doubt killers staring me down.
It doesn't got something to do with that there bag of supplies now, does it? Partner, know what you say, you Philistine?
They've been eyeing my bike since the moment they saw me. The bags of supplies, in particular. I humor them.
There's a town nearby. Gonna barter for supplies.
The female steps forward. Immediately, I place my hand on my holstered revolver. She receives the message, loud and clear. She stops, straight in her tracks.
Whoa there, big feller. We don't mean you no harm. Excuse my compadre. Nah, why don't you say we settle this in the more humane way?
Who are you people? And what do you want from me?
One of the men stepped forward. He spoke with an English accent.
Well, it's quite simple now, innit? We're the highway patrollers. We do security for that town you're gonna bar in. So why don't you stop being us and let us do our job and patrol?
The 4th guy speaks too, but all that comes out is gibberish.
You gonna have to excuse Daniel here. He ran with the wrong crowd before. Long story short, let's just say Cat didn't get his tongue. They did. Yanked that sucker right out of his mouth. Watched him do it myself.
The mute starts signing while looking at the woman. I take a close look at his fingers. His nails were sharpened, resembling claws, and were caked in what looked to be dried blood. I look at the others. They had similar nails as well. I make a mental note. These guys were definitely not who they said they were.
What's he saying?
He says sharing is caring. Couldn't have said it better myself.
They all approach me. I place my hand on my holstered revolver and back away, not wanting to use it, but if push came to shove, I would, without hesitation.
Sharing is a good way to get you killed.
Now, son, who says we want any of your things? See that town a couple exits away? The one you's gonna barter in. It's been abandoned for weeks now.
What happened?
A I'm sure you're damn well aware of what happened. What always happens. Another group came about and took them out. The only thing you'll find there in that town are dead bodies. The town is virtually a graveyard now.
At that moment, the black tarp behind them goes flying as a gust of wind takes it away, revealing what was underneath it. 2 dead bodies surrounded by a pool of blood from where some of their limbs had been severed.
I'm sorta had to tell you this, but we was never after your supplies. We was after you.
You people are sick. Insane.
Look, it ain't nothing personal. This is just the way it is. This is just the way we survive now. Don't worry though. We'll make it quick and painless.
I remove the revolver from my holster.
Try it.
The mute laughs and signs to his boss.
Yep. I think he's full of crap too. Ain't no way that revolver is fully loaded. Haven't seen no survivors use ammunition in months.
They draw their blades, ready to attack.
Even so, let's say you do got a few bullets in that there gun of yours. There's 4 of us, and there's only 1 of you.
They all charge at me at once. I aim my weapon and fire 4 times, each bullet piercing into their forehead. Quick, painless. Silence would have been their best course of action. The wind blows as I holster my weapon and light a cigarette. Then silence ensues. She speaks to me again. This time, she thanks me. Dear diary, today I killed 4 people.
My friend left her husband, and now I'm the one in fear for my life. A little over a month ago, a friend of mine decided to leave her abusive husband after 20 years of being together. Now, I haven't known this friend for even a year yet. We met at work, but we instantly clicked. I guess when you meet someone who's gone through the same type of traumatic experiences, that happens. The weekend before she left, they came to my son's birthday party. This was the first time I'd ever met the man, aside from seeing him when he'd come into the store we both worked at. Some things to know about me. I live in the middle of nowhere. Like it's 30 minutes into town that only has 2 red lights and a Walmart middle of nowhere. I've been through hell with my ex-husband, to the point where I have a no-contact order, where he's not ever allowed to have any kind of information for me or about me. Also, my Facebook is set to where unless I specifically give you the link or you knew me 20 years ago, you'll never find me. So, that Friday, I go into town and get cigs and some other things, and my friend tells me she's leaving that day. She's not taking her teenage children because both of them act just like their daddy, plus would have told him exactly where she was at. She was also turning off her phone. That literally was the only information I had. And I told her to be careful and let me know she's safe when she could. And then I went home. Well, about 9:30 that night, I'm at home alone when all of a sudden my doorbell rings. It's her husband. Is my wife here? He doesn't even use her name. No. Well, do you know where she's at? No, but if I hear anything from her, I'll let her know you're looking for her. Look, I don't know why you're hiding her or won't tell me the truth, but her boys are distraught. They think that she's gone and killed herself. I push my door open. Well, do you want to come in and search? Because she's not here. And I don't know where she's at, but like I said, if I hear from her, I'll let her know you're looking for her. He curses at me and walks down the steps. He proceeds to sit out front my house for almost 10 minutes. He then pulls around the back side of the area by the lake and sits there for who knows how long. I left to go get a friend to come stay with me that night. A little after midnight, I get a Facebook message from her youngest son asking if I knew where she's at. I told him the same thing that I told his father, that no, I didn't. But if I heard from her, I'd tell her they were looking for her. He says thank you, and that's it. Now, having her husband show up at my house and her kid finding my Facebook set my anxiety on edge, and I didn't sleep much that night. So I was awake at 6 a.m. when her oldest son messages me on Facebook demanding to know where his mom is, telling me I better not lie to him or else. I told him the same thing I'd been saying. He proceeds to tell me his daddy filed a missing persons report and the cops were coming for me because I was hiding her. A little after 7, I get a call from a number I don't know. I normally don't answer numbers like that, but hoping it was my friend, I answered. Hello? Angel, this is Sophie's sister Michelle. Do you know where my sister is at? No, but if I hear from her, I'll tell her everyone's looking for her. Well, when's the last time you seen her? How was she acting? Was she on anything? Saw her at work. She was acting fine to me, and no, she wasn't on anything. She proceeds to go on about the cops and the call ends. A little later, Sophie messages me. I call her and fill her in on everything and help her make a 3-way call to law enforcement to talk to them. I'm heading back into town to get gas because I'm leaving for a few days when my phone rings. It's mine and Sophie's former store manager from where we worked. So I guess you're wondering why everyone's trying to get a hold of you so bad. No, I know. Well, I gave all her family your number because I know you know something. Remember that no contact order I mentioned earlier? This thing risked it all over something I had absolutely nothing to do with. I hung up because then I started shutting down, went into a full-blown panic attack when I found out shortly after that this incident had resulted in my number being posted onto her Facebook, telling all of Sophie's friends to reach out to me for information. This is a really long story, but I'll try and sum this up. What has proceeded over the last 4 weeks is being accused of hiding her, breaking up her family. I was originally a crackhead, then I got upgraded to a meth head. I have been harassed, physically threatened, and sexually threatened. Her husband has stalked my house, broken into my house, and all of this after they were told by law enforcement she did this by her own choice, and I had nothing to do with it. I have reports with 3 different departments. Her husband was given a criminal trespass. Despite that, he still broke in. And the deputy handling things from my house pushed me to go for a restraining order, which the judge denied because he hasn't done anything to physically harm me. I'm currently some hours away from home, but I'm so tired and mad and terrified. I had already gone through this crap with my own ex. I don't think I can mentally handle going through it again. And I've lost the one safe place I had. My daddy's house is no longer safe for me because this man has targeted me. Not even my friend saw this coming from her husband. So Colin, if you hear this, please, let's not meet ever again. After weeks of unexplained murders, the ominous unknown killer is still on the rise. After little evidence has been found, a young boy states that he survived one of the killer's attacks and bravely tells his story. I had a bad dream and I woke up in the middle of the night, says the boy. I saw that, for some reason, the window was open, even though I remember it being closed before I went to bed. I got up and shut it once more. Afterwards, I simply crawled under my covers and tried to get back to sleep. That's when I had a strange feeling, like someone was watching me. I looked up and nearly jumped out of my bed. There, in the little ray of light illuminating from between my curtains, were a pair of 2 eyes. These weren't regular eyes. They were dark, ominous eyes. They were bordered in black and just plain out terrified me. That's when I saw his mouth, a long, horrendous smile that made every hair on my body stand up. The figure stood there, watching me. Finally, after what seemed like forever, he said it. A simple phrase, but said in a way only a madman could speak. He said, "Go to sleep." I let out a scream. That's what sent him at me. He pulled up a knife, aiming at my heart. He jumped on top of my bed. I fought back. I kicked. I punched. I rolled around, trying to knock him off me. That's when my dad busted in. The man threw the knife. It went into my dad's shoulder. The man probably would have finished him off if one of the neighbors hadn't alerted the police. They drove into the parking lot and ran towards the door.
Mr. Police, come out with your hands
The
up.
man turned and ran down the hallway. I heard a smash like glass breaking as I came out of my room. I saw that the window that was pointing towards the back of my house was broken. I looked out of it to see him vanish into the distance. I can tell you one thing. I will never forget that face, those cold, evil eyes, and that psychotic smile. They will never leave my head. Police are still on the lookout for this man. If you see anyone that fits this description, please contact your local police department. Jeff and his family had moved into a new neighborhood since then. His dad had gotten a promotion at work, and they thought it would be best to live in one of those fancy neighborhoods. Jeff and his brother, Lou, couldn't complain though. A new, better house. What was not to love? As they were getting unpacked, one of their neighbors came by. "Hello," she said. "I'm Barbara. I live across the street from you." "Well, I just wanted to introduce myself and to introduce my son." She turns around and calls her son over. "Billy, these are our new neighbors." Billy said hi and ran back to play in his yard. "Well," said Jeff's mom, "I'm Margaret, and this is my husband Peter, and my 2 sons, Jeff and Lou." They each introduced themselves, and then Barbara invited them to her son's birthday. Jeff and his brother were about to object when their mother said that they would love to. When Jeff and his family are done packing, Jeff went up to his mom. "Mom, why would you invite us to some kid's party? If you haven't noticed, I'm not some dumb kid." "Jeff," said his mother, "we just moved here. We should show that we want to spend time with our neighbors. Now, we're going to that party, and that's final." Jeff started to talk, but stopped himself, knowing that he couldn't do anything. Whenever his mom said something, it was final. He walked up to his room and plopped down on his bed. He sat there, looking up at his ceiling, when suddenly, he got a weird feeling. Not so much a pain, but a weird feeling. He dismissed it. He heard his mother call him down to get his stuff, and he walked down to get it. The next day, Jeff walked downstairs to get breakfast and got ready for school. As he sat there, eating his breakfast, he once again got that feeling. This time, it was stronger. It gave him a slight tugging pain, but he, once again, dismissed it. As he and Lou finished breakfast, they walked down to the bus stop. They sat there waiting for the bus, and then, all of a sudden, some kid on a skateboard jumped over them, only inches above their laps. They both jumped back in surprise. "Hey, what the hell?" The kid landed and turned back to them. He kicked his skateboard up and caught it with his hands. The kid seemed to be about 12, 1 year younger than Jeff. He wore a name brand shirt and ripped blue jeans. "Well, well, well. It looks like we got some new meat." Suddenly, 2 other kids appeared. One was super skinny and the other was huge. "Well, since you're new here, I'd like to introduce ourselves. Over there is Keith." Jeff and Lou looked over to the skinny kid. He had a dopey face like you'd expect a sidekick to have. "And he's Troy." They looked over at the fat kid. Talk about a tub of lard. This kid didn't look like he exercised a day in his life. "And I," said the first kid. I'm Randy. Now, for all the kids in this neighborhood, there is a small price for bus fare, if you catch my drift." Lou stood up, ready to punch the lights out of the kid's eyes, when one of his friends pulled a knife on him. "I had hoped you'd be more cooperative, but it seems we must do this the hard way." The kid walked up to Lou and took his wallet out of his pocket. Jeff got that feeling again. Now, it was truly strong, a burning sensation. He stood up, but Lou gestured him to sit down. Jeff ignored him and walked up to the kid. "Listen here, you little punk. Give back my bro's wallet or else." Randy put the wallet in his pocket and pulled out his own knife. "Oh? And what will you do?" Just as he finished the sentence, Jeff popped the kid in the nose. As Randy reached for his face, Jeff grabbed the kid's wrist and broke it. Randy screamed, and Jeff grabbed the knife from the kid's hands. Troy and Keith rushed Jeff, but Jeff was too quick. He threw Randy to the ground. Keith lashed out at him, but Jeff ducked and stabbed him in the arm. Keith dropped the knife and fell to the ground screaming. Troy rushed him too, but Jeff didn't even need the knife. He just punched Troy straight in the stomach, and Troy went down. As he fell, he puked all over the place. Lou could do nothing but look in amazement at Jeff. "Jeff, how'd you..." That was all he said. They saw the bus coming and knew they'd be blamed for the whole thing. So they started running as fast as they could. As they ran, they looked back and saw the bus driver rushing over to Randy and the others. As Jeff and Lou made it to school, they didn't dare tell what happened. All they did was sit and listen. Lou just thought of that as his brother beating up a few kids, but Jeff knew it was more. It was something scary. As he got that feeling, he felt how powerful it was, the urge to just hurt someone. He didn't like how it sounded, but he couldn't help but feel happy. He felt that strange feeling go away and stay away for the entire day of school. Even as he walked home, due to the situation of the bus stop, and how now he probably wouldn't be taking a bus anymore, he felt happy. When he got home, his parents asked him how his day was, and he said, in a somewhat ominous voice, "It was a wonderful day." Next morning, he heard a knock on his front door. He walked down to find 2 police officers at the door, his mother looking back at him with an angry look. "Jeff, these officers tell me that you attacked 3 kids, that it wasn't regular fighting, and that they were stabbed. Stabbed? Jeff's gaze fell to the floor, showing his mother that it was true. Mom, they were the ones who pulled the knives out on me and Lou. Son, said one of the cops, we found 3 kids, 2 stabbed, 1 having a bruise on his stomach, and we have witnesses proving that you fled the scene. Now, what does that tell us? Jeff knew it was no use. He could say him and Lou had been attacked, but then there was no proof it was not them who attacked first. They couldn't say that they weren't fleeing, because truth be told, they were. So Jeff couldn't defend himself or Lou. Son, call down your brother. Jeff couldn't do it, since it was him who beat up all the kids. Sir, it was me. I was the one who beat up the kids. Lou tried to hold me back, but he couldn't stop me. The cop looked at his partner and they both nod. Well, kid, looks like a year in juvie. Wait, Lou said. The officer pulled their guns out and locked them onto Lou. It was me. I beat up those little punks. Had the marks to prove it. He lifted up his sleeves to reveal cuts and bruises, as if he was in a struggle. Son, put the knife down, said the officer. Lou held up the knife and dropped it to the ground. He put his hands up and walked over to the cops. No, Lou, it was me. I did it. Jeff had tears running down his face. Poor brother, trying to take the blame for what I did. Well then, take me away. The police led Lou out to the patrol car. Lou! Tell them it was me. Tell them! I was the one who beat up those kids. Jeff's mother put her hand on his shoulder. Jeff, please. You don't have to lie. We know it's Lou. You can stop. It's bad enough we've got one of you. Jeff watched helplessly as the cop car speeds off with Lou inside. A few minutes later, Jeff's dad pulled into the driveway, seeing Jeff's face and knowing something was wrong. Son, what is it? Jeff couldn't answer. His vocal cords were strained from crying. Instead, Jeff's mother walked his father inside to break the bad news to him, as Jeff wept in the driveway. After an hour or so, Jeff walked back into the house, seeing that his parents were both shocked, sad, and disappointed. He couldn't look at them. He couldn't see how they thought of Lou when it was actually his fault. He just went to sleep, trying to get the whole thing off his mind. 2 days went by, with no word from Lou at the JDC. No friends staying out with him. Nothing but sadness and guilt. That is until Saturday, when Jeff is woke up by his mother with a happy, sunshiny face. Jeff, it's today, she said as she opened up the curtains and let light flood into his room. What's today? Asked Jeff as he stirs awake. Why, it's Billy's party. He was now fully awake. Mom, you're joking, right? You don't expect me to actually go to some kid's party after. There was a long pause. Jeff, we both know what happened, but I think this party could be something you need to brighten up your last couple days. Now get dressed. Jeff's mother walked out of the room and downstairs to get herself ready. Jeff fought himself to get up. He picked out a random shirt and pair of jeans and walked downstairs. He saw his mother and father all dressed up. His mother in a dress and his father in a suit. He thought, why would they ever wear such fancy clothes to a kid's party? Jeff, is that all you're going to wear? Said Jeff's mom. Better than wearing too much, he said. His mother pushed down the feeling to yell at him and hit it with a smile. Now, Jeff, we may be overdressed, but this is how you go if you want to make an impression, said his father. Jeff grunted and went back into his room. I don't have any fancy clothes, he yelled downstairs. Just pick something out, called his mother. He looked around in his closet for what he would call fancy. He found a pair of black dress pants he had for special occasions and an undershirt. He couldn't find a shirt to go with it, though. He looked around and found only striped and patterned shirts, none of which would go with dress pants. Finally, he found a white hoodie and put it on. "You're wearing that?" they both said. His mother looked at her watch. "Oh well, no time to change, let's go," she said as she herded Jeff and his father out the door. They crossed the street over to Barbara and Billy's house. They knocked on the door, and at it appeared that Barbara, just like his parents, way overdressed. As they walked inside, all Jeff could see were adults. No kids. "The kids are all out in the yard, Jeff. How about you go and meet some of them?" said Barbara. Jeff walked outside to a yard full of kids. They were running around in weird cowboy costumes and shooting each other with plastic guns. He might as well be standing in a Toys R Us store. Suddenly, a kid came up to him and handed him a toy gun and hat. "Hey, wanna play?" he said. No, kid. I'm way too old for this stuff." The kid looked at him with that weird puppy dog face. "Please?" said the kid. "Fine," said Jeff. He put on the hat and started to pretend to shoot at the kids. At first, he thought it was totally ridiculous, but then he started to look like he was actually having fun. It might not have been super cool, but it was the first time he had done something that took his mind off of Lou. So he played with the kids for a while, until he heard a noise. A weird rolling noise. Then it hit him. Randy, Troy, and Keith all jumped over the fence on their skateboards. Jeff dropped the fake gun and ripped off the hat. Randy looked at Jeff with a burning hatred. "Hello, Jeff, is it?" he said. "We have some unfinished business." Jeff saw his bruised nose. "I think we're even. I beat the crap out of you, and you got my brother sent to JDC. Randy got an angry look in his eyes. "Oh, no. I don't go for even. I go for winning. You may have kicked our asses that one day, but not today." As he said that, Randy rushed at Jeff. They both fell to the ground. Randy punched Jeff in the nose, and Jeff grabbed him by the ear and headbutted him. Jeff pushed Randy off of him, and both rose to their feet. Kids were screaming and parents were running out of the house. Troy and Keith both pulled guns out of their pockets. "No one interrupts or guts will fly," they said. Randy pulled a knife on Jeff and stabbed into his shoulder. Jeff screamed and fell to his knees. Randy started kicking him in the face. After 3 kicks, Jeff grabs his foot and twists it, causing Randy to fall to the ground. Jeff stood up and walked towards the back door. Troy grabbed him. "Need some help?" He picks Jeff up by the back of the collar and throws him through the patio door. As Jeff tries to stand, he is kicked down to the ground. Randy repeatedly starts kicking Jeff until he starts coughing blood. "Come on, Jeff, fight me!" He picks Jeff up and throws him into the kitchen. Randy sees a bottle of vodka on the counter and smashes the glass over Jeff's head. "Fight me! Fight me!" He throws Jeff back into the living room. "Come on, Jeff, look at me." Jeff glances up, his face riddled with blood. "I was the one who got your brother sent to JDC. And now, you're just gonna sit here and let him rot in there for a whole year. You should be ashamed of yourself." Jeff starts to get up. Look who decided to stand and fight. Jeff is now to his feet, blood and vodka on his face. Once again, he gets that strange feeling, the one in which he hasn't felt for a while. Finally, he's up, Randy says as he runs at Jeff. That's when it happens. Something inside Jeff snaps. His psyche is destroyed. All rational thinking is gone. All he can do is kill. He grabs Randy and pile drives him to the ground. He gets on top of him and punches him straight in the heart. The punch causes Randy's heart to stop. As Randy gasps for breath, Jeff hammers down on him, punch after punch. Blood gushes from Randy's body until he takes one final breath and dies. Everyone is looking at Jeff now. The parents, the crying kids, even Troy and Keith. But they easily break from their gaze and point their guns at Jeff. Jeff sees the guns trained on him and runs for the stairs. As he runs, Troy and Keith fire upon him, each shot missing. Jeff runs up the stairs. He hears Troy and Keith follow up behind. As they let out their final rounds of bullets, Jeff ducks into the bathroom. He grabs the towel rack and rips it off the wall. Troy and Keith race in, knives ready. Troy swings his knife at Jeff, who backs away and bangs the towel rack into Troy's face. Troy goes down hard, and now all that's left is Keith. He's more agile than Troy though, and ducks when Jeff swings the towel rack. He dropped the knife and grabbed Jeff by the neck. He pushed him into the wall. A thing of bleach fell down on top of him from the top shelf. It burnt both of their eyes, and they both started to scream. Jeff wiped at his eyes as best as he could. He pulled back the towel rack and swung it straight into Keith's head. As he lay there, bleeding to death, he let out an ominous smile. "What's so funny?" asked Jeff. Keith pulled out a lighter and switched it on. "What's funny," he said, "is that you're covered in bleach and alcohol." Jeff's eyes widened as Keith threw the lighter at him. As soon as the flame made contact with him, the flames ignited the alcohol within the vodka. While the alcohol burned him, the bleach bleached his skin. Jeff let out a terrible screech as he caught on fire. He tried to roll out the fire, but it was no use. The alcohol had made him a walking inferno. He ran down the hall and fell down the stairs. Everybody started screaming as they saw Jeff, now a man of fire, drop to the ground, nearly dead. The last thing Jeff saw was his mother and the other parents trying to extinguish the flame. That's when he passed out. When Jeff woke up, he had a cast wrapped around his face. He couldn't see anything, but he felt a cast on his shoulder and wrapping all over his body, as though he were a mummy. He tried to stand up, but he realized that there was a tube in his arm, and when he tried to get up, it fell out, and a nurse rushed in. "I don't think you can get out of bed just yet, mister," she said, as she put him back in his bed and reinserted the tube. Jeff sat there with no vision and with no idea of what the surroundings were. Finally, after hours, he heard his mother. "Honey, are you okay?" she asked. Jeff couldn't answer though. His face was covered, and he was unable to speak. "I have great news. After all the witnesses told the police that Randy confessed to trying to attack you, they decided to let Lou go." This made Jeff almost bolt up, stopping halfway, remembering the tube coming out of his arm. "He'll be out by tomorrow, and then you two will be able to be together again." She hugs Jeff, and a couple hours later, she says her goodbyes. The next couple of weeks were those where Jeff was visited by his family. Then came the day where his bandages were finally removed. His family were all there to see it, what he would look like. As the doctors unwrapped the bandages from Jeff's face, everyone was on edge. They waited until the last bandage, holding the cover over his face, was almost removed. "Let's hope for the best," said the doctor. He quickly pulls the cloth, letting the rest fall from Jeff's face. Jeff's mother screams at the sight of his face. Lou and Jeff's dad stare, awestruck. What happened to my face?" Jeff said. He rushed out of bed and ran to the bathroom. He looked into the mirror and saw the cause of the distress. His face. It was horrible. His lips were burnt to a deep shade of red. His face was turned into a pure white color, and his hair singed from brown to black. He slowly put his hand to his face. It had a sort of leathery feel to it now. He looked back at his family, then back at the mirror. "Jeff, said Lou. "It's not that bad." "Not that bad?" said Jeff. "It's perfect." His family were equally surprised. Jeff started laughing uncontrollably. His parents noticed that his left eye and hand were twitching. "Jeff, are you okay?" "Okay? I've never felt more happy in my life." "Look at me. This face goes perfectly with me." He couldn't stop laughing. He stroked his face, feeling it, looking at it in the mirror. "Now you're asking, what caused this?" Well, you may recall when Jeff was fighting Randy, something in his mind, his sanity, snapped. Now, he was left as a crazy killing machine. But his parents had no idea. "Doctor," said Jeff's mom, "is my son alright? You know, in the head?" "Oh, yes. This behavior is typical for patients that have taken very large amounts of painkillers. If his behavior doesn't change in a few weeks, bring him back in here, and we'll give him a psychological test." "Oh, thank you, doctor." Jeff's mother went over to Jeff. "Jeff, sweetie, it's time to go." Jeff looks away from the mirror, his face still formed into a crazy smile. "Okay, Mommy." His mother took him by the shoulder and took him to get his clothes. "This is what came in," said the lady at the desk. Jeff's mom looked down to see the black dress pants and the white hoodie her son wore. They were now clean of blood and stitched together. Jeff's mother led him to his room and made him put his clothes on. Then they left, not knowing that this was their final day of life. Later that night, Jeff's mother woke to a sound coming from the bathroom. It sounded as if someone was crying. She slowly walked over to see what it was. When she looked into the bathroom, she saw a horrendous sight. Jeff had taken a knife and carved a smile into his cheeks. "Jeff, what have you done?" asked his mother. Jeff looked over to his mother. "I couldn't keep smiling, Mom. It hurt after a while. Now I can smile forever." Jeff's mother noticed his eyes, ringed in black. "Jeff, your eyes." His eyes were seemingly never closing. "Oh, this? I just couldn't see my face. I got tired of my eyes starting to close. So I burnt out my eyelids and now I can see myself. My new face." Jeff's mother slowly started to back away, seeing that her son was going insane. What's wrong, Mommy? Aren't I beautiful?" "Yes, Jeff. Yes, you are. Let me go get Daddy so he can see your face." She ran into the room and shook Jeff's dad from his sleep. "Honey, get the gun. She stopped as she saw Jeff in the doorway, holding a knife. "Mommy, you lied." And that's the last thing they hear as Jeff rushes them with the knife, gutting both of them. His brother Lou woke up, startled by some of the noise. He didn't hear anything else, so he just shut his eyes and tried to go back to sleep. As he was on the border of slumber, he got the strangest feeling that someone was watching him. He looked up before Jeff's hand covered his mouth. He slowly raised the knife, ready to plunge it into Lou. Lou thrashed here and there, trying to escape Jeff's grip. "Shh," Jeff said. "Just go to sleep now."
I am always with you. I was there from the time you were born. I stood in the delivery room, staring down at you before you could even open your eyes to see me. Your family and doctors couldn't see me there in the corner, watching you with cloudy eyes. But I was there from the time you were born, and I followed you home. I was with you always, your constant companion. You played with your toys alone while I stared from all angles. In nearby mirrors, my matted, clotted hair with oily sweat that hung off my dented forehead like glue. I accompanied you all the time, drifting behind your mother's car on your ride to preschool. You thought you were alone in the bathroom, but I was on the other side of the door, wind whistling through the bruised hole in my throat, my arms twisted and hanging in their sockets as I stood hunched on the other side of the shower curtain. I wait and follow you. I follow and drift behind you. I'm not seen. I'm almost non-existent in light. You never saw me that morning as I sat across from you at the breakfast table, a shiny red clod hanging from an empty tooth socket as I gaped grotesquely at you. I wonder sometimes if you know I'm there. I think you are aware, but you'll never understand just how close I am. I spend hours of your day doing nothing more than breathing. In your ear, I crave to be close to you, to always wrap my crippled arms around your neck. I lie near you every single night, cloudy eyes staring at your ceiling, underneath your bed, at your sleeping face in the dark. Yes, you caught me staring occasionally. Your parents came running down to your room one night when you screamed. You were just beginning to talk, so you were only able to cry out, "Man, man, man in my room." You thought you'd never forget the sight of me, with my collapsed jaw hanging to my chest. Swinging back and forth, I sank back into your closet, and your mother was unable to see me, though you pointed and pointed and pointed. You thought you'd never forget when they left that same night. You saw the closet door crack ever so slightly, and me crawling across the floor to your bed on all fours, in jerking movements as I pushed myself under your bed on disjointed limbs. You learned a new word from me, boogeyman. Not quite the monster you thought I was. I'm just waiting and following you always, stroking your face with my knotted fingers as you sleep. You'll see me again soon. Any day now. I'm coming. Blunt and brutal. One day, you'll walk across the road, and I believe I'll plow into you with a loud roar and screech. You'll roll on the pavement, roll under the wheels, blunt force metal fenders and my fingers touching your face again and again. You'll stare up from the cold pavement with cloudy eyes. Your matted, clotted hair hangs in your face and your jaw is unhinged and swaying against your chest. You'll notice me approaching. No one else will see me. You will stare past them into my eyes, and I'll leer down at you. From the first time in our life, something like a smile will come over my face. you'll swear you're looking into a mirror as clotted bits of scarlet bubble from our mouths. I'll lean down past the doctors and the ogling people and pick you up in my crooked arms. Our faces will touch, my wings will unfurl, and then you'll have to follow me. And I am always with you, for I am your guardian angel.
A couple of months ago, I began my classes at Chico State University. As I was preparing for my freshman year, I was able to find everything that I needed, except for a laptop. I'm not exactly very good at letting a dollar go for something, especially when I could get something for less. I scoured the internet for good deals on laptops, finding none that suited my frugal habits. Classes were only 2 weeks away, and I was becoming desperate for a computer. Several days later, I saw an ad in the newspaper for a laptop that was being sold for only $600, and not too far from where I lived. It was a very nice Dell laptop too. It seemed odd that it was being sold for $1,000 less than store price. I drove to the seller's address the following day. The house was farther out of the city, butting up to a dense forest. Outside of the house was an old Chevrolet, and a mess of old signs and other various vintage-looking items. I rang the doorbell, and a thin man in a flannel jacket came to the door. When I asked about the laptop, he almost looked relieved and told me he was ready to sell it immediately. Luckily, I came with cash in hand, and after proof of good condition, I went home with a new computer. Excited to have my first self-bought laptop, I powered it up and began uploading my programs and applications onto it. Upon searching the hard drive, I found a folder hidden away on it, which was odd because the man selling it told me that the memory was wiped clean and ready for a fresh start. The folder was titled 09/17/10, presumably a date. I opened the folder, revealing 6 videos and 3 pictures. Curiosity got the best of me, and I decided to watch the videos. The first video was titled 001. The video was shot from a shaky camcorder inside of a vehicle, recording a woman walking out of a bar and getting into her car at night. After a couple of seconds, the woman drives off, and almost immediately, the person recording the video began to drive after her. The video ended after 24 seconds. It almost seemed like the cameraman had been waiting for the woman for a while. Come to think of it, I wasn't too alarmed by this at the time, just a little unsettled. I opened the next video file, titled 002. I assumed that this was the next part of the first video. My assumption was right, as it began with the cameraman on top of the console, facing out of the windshield. It was raining now, leading me to believe that this was a short while after the first video ended. I could barely make out that the vehicle 2 cars ahead of this one was the same car that the woman at the bar left in. This went on for 47 seconds before the camera cut out. I began to get a little nervous, fearing that this might take a turn for the worse. But, as if I was watching a television show, I wanted to see exactly where this was headed. Not totally concerned yet, I decided to press on. The third video was of course titled 003. This video was the one that got me officially concerned. The clip began from the same shaky hands as the first clip. It was now pouring rain outside of the car, and I could barely make out a figure in a fur coat with an umbrella walking to the front door of a house. I could only assume who this person was and whose house this belonged to. The figure entered the house and closed the door. The following stillness greatly unnerved me. The only thing that could be heard was the sound of rain dumping onto the top of the car. After roughly 2 minutes of this nerve-wracking nothingness, the lights inside of the house cut out. Another minute or so went by before the camera was placed onto the console again, and the sound of a person exiting the car broke the stillness. After the car door quietly closed, another figure, this time hooded, could be seen walking towards the house. I began to feel a knot tightening in the bottom of my stomach as the stranger walked around the back of the house. Whoever this person was, they definitely weren't supposed to be there. After another couple of seconds, the lights to the outside of the house cut out. It was pitch black, and only the rain alerted me that the camera was still rolling. The video ended after 9 minutes of rain and darkness. I was now pretty sure that this was not an innocent little project or anything of that nature, and I began to feel stupid for not checking this laptop seller's credibility. Was this person stalking the woman, the same person that I met earlier? Throughout the whole experience, I had a dormant thought in the back of my head to call the police. But I wasn't ready just yet. Reluctantly, I began the fourth video. 004. It was dark again, but the rain had stopped, and I was left with only silence. Not long after the clip began, I could make out the sound of footsteps on gravel, getting louder as someone was approaching the vehicle. The car door opened, and the dome light was turned on, and I could tell that the camera was now on the floor of the car, pointing upwards towards the roof. I heard some fumbling in the background, and suddenly, a thump sounded from the back of the truck. An arm abruptly obstructed the camera's view, and a large tarp could be seen being pulled out the car. At this time, I had only one scenario running through my head, and I had hoped it wasn't true. The person picked up the camera and put it back onto the console and began to back up. They drove for a good 3 minutes before parking in a branched off road and exiting the car to work on the load they were carrying. 6 minutes after, the car was moved again to a different location, and the camera was picked up and carried underhanded away from the car. I could see now that it was the same crap bucket truck that was in front of the seller's house. I was about ready to call the cops on this creep when the camera turned towards the house. It was a completely different house than the one I visited. I was a little relieved by this, though it didn't prove anything. As the fourth video came to an end, I was wondering whether or not I was prepared to see what came next. I could only hope that this was a prank, or at least had a happy ending. 005 began inside the house. It was extremely dark, and the only thing I could make out was a figure that would occasionally walk in front of the camera. It was also quiet for the first few minutes, minus the occasional barking of a dog outside. Eventually, a small sound started to appear. The small sound soon escalated to a loud, muffled scream. Shaking and struggling sounds became more apparent as time went on, as well as crying. A light abruptly came on, and the camera was lifted and panned to the center of the room, revealing a beaten and bloodied woman tied to a chair. From what I could make out, this was, in fact, the woman from the bar. The camera zoomed in on her face for what seemed like an eternity before stopping. I couldn't believe that this was happening. The original hope that this was a movie or something had long since diminished. With only one video remaining, I was beginning to fear for my own safety. I locked my door, closed my blinds, and pushed onward. I began 006 with a small hope that this woman was still alive and that I could have her saved. The final installment of this horror show began in a bathroom setting. The camera was placed on the counter, facing a mirror in which I could see a door. The only sound I can make out was a familiar sound that destroyed my hopes. Power tools. I sat in front of the screen for what felt like hours before the sound stopped. More silence. Then heavy footsteps, accompanied by what sounded like something being dragged. The doorknob turned, and the door was pushed open. Out of the darkness of the rest of the house appeared a middle-aged woman dressed in what I can only describe as lab attire, sporting a respirator and a pair of long rubber gloves. This, for some strange reason, gave me a small amount of relief. In the reflection, the woman struggled to drag something to the bathtub. As she hoisted it into the tub, I could see that it was a large, black garbage bag. I felt as though I was dreaming. It was like I was watching a horror movie unfolding on the screen. She lifted the bag up from the tub, now empty. She picked up the camera and placed it onto the ground, facing the tub. On the floor, in front of the bathtub, was an assortment of corrosive substances and several other empty containers. The woman began to dump the liquids into the tub, which was followed by an awful, awful noise that I can only describe as pop rocks mixed with coke. The video ended, and I was left bewildered and panicked. I finally opened the pictures. The first was a picture of the truck. The second was a picture of the girl tied up before she was beaten. And the third picture brought up a corrupted file notice. Perhaps that was a good thing. I managed to keep the two pictures before I handed the laptop over to the police. I was reimbursed my $600, along with a bonus. Apparently, the victim was the young girlfriend of the older woman's ex-husband. The older woman was arrested almost a year before, but was freed of all charges due to lack of evidence. And the ex-husband was incarcerated instead. I guess this was the missing link. I hope this solved any unanswered questions. Although, I'm not sure who the man in the flannel jacket was, or how he got a hold of the laptop, or how he owns the same truck as the murderer. I guess I'll just have to leave that to the police.